Black people do take care of their health. Black people do go to therapy. Black people can do self-pay or private pay. Black people will pay for therapy. They will send their children to therapy. They will go to...
This is Heard Business School, where we sit down with private practice owners and industry experts to learn about the business of therapy together. I'm your host, Michael Fulwiler. Serving historically underserved communities is a profound passion that shapes not just how therapists practice, but also how they run their businesses. Today, my guest is Dr. Ayanna Abrams, a psychologist based in Atlanta with extensive clinical and research experience working with Black people across the diaspora. As the daughter of parents who emigrated from the Caribbean to the U.S., she spent a lifetime navigating issues of cultural difference, transition, and identity. I had the opportunity to get to know Dr. Abrams through a program I offered during the pandemic called Consulting for Therapists, and have been following her work since. In our conversation, Dr. Abrams shares the lessons she learned from starting her private practice, including the challenges she faced as a Black female therapist and how she overcame them. We discuss the importance of networking and building relationships, which played a key role in her business success. Dr. Abrams also talks about her involvement in the community and co-founding of Not So Strong, a mental health platform for Black women. She provides insights on the common misconceptions therapists have about private practice and shares practical advice on balancing clinical work with other professional engagements like training, consultations, and presentations. Here's my conversation with Dr. Ayanna Abrams. Enjoy. Dr. Ayanna Abrams, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to chat.
So glad you're here. You are actually a former student of mine, which is how we know each other.
Time has flown, and it has not.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of marketing consulting with mental health companies, and therapists were reaching out to me, asking me how I was working as a consultant and how I was working with these mental health companies. And so I did a few one-on-one coaching calls with therapists that seemed to be helpful. So, I figured there was an opportunity here. So I partnered with my friend Vic Dougal, who you know, and we put together this program called Consulting for Therapists that you were part of. So I got to work with you for a few months through that program, which was really fun.
Gosh, I can't believe that was what, 2021? That was 2022. One of them years.
At least 3 years ago.
At least 3 years, yeah. One thing Mike gonna do, he gonna put together an opportunity.
Yeah, I want to talk about consulting and the non-clinical work that you do. But before we get into all of that, I would love to talk about your background as a therapist. Your parents, they emigrated from the Caribbean. Could you start by talking about how that has impacted your career and your journey as a therapist, particularly your education and the population that you work with in your practice?
So my parents are from Guyana, which is a Caribbean country, but it's in South America. It's more landlocked than not. And they moved to the U.S. When I was born. I was raised in New Jersey. And it's interesting, being raised by Caribbean immigrants in some ways thrust me into the career because I found myself really interested in differences between people, right? So I'm this Caribbean household, but I was raised in this like Jewish, Italian, right, kind of area of New Jersey. So it was vastly different. So I'm like straddling two cultures all the time. I'm this way outside. I'm this, young Black American girl, but I'm not, because inside we eat different foods. My parents have an accent. They have really, really different rules than a lot of my friends have. So it was just me kind of navigating all of that. And I think that was my initial interest in differences between people, because I felt different and kind of really split. And, they always say that most therapists, not all therapists, are some type of wounded healer. So I'd also say that in some ways, things that were happening in my life or kind of in my family probably also thrust me into wanting to help people. But also because my parents are Caribbean immigrants, they didn't believe in therapy. So it actually wasn't helpful for me to go into this particular field. They wanted me to be a doctor, but I'm essentially the wrong kind of doctor, right? The doctor that they mean is a medical doctor. They want you to be a doctor, they want you to be a lawyer, or they want you to go into the military. Those are my like three options, per se. And I didn't want to be a medical doctor. So like psychology and all that stuff kind of really wasn't on my mind until I took a class in high school. My senior year, I took a psychology class and we watched, gosh, I used to remember, this is my like college application story. Movie with Haley Joel Osment, and not Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
Movie with like him and Kevin Spacey and Helen Hunt. Gosh. But he is this little boy and his mom is like, he's in the school, he's dating, all this kind of stuff, and just things happen in the movie, and it has this really, really sad ending. So I remember wanting to work with families, right, and wanting to help kids like emotionally and help parents emotionally. So that kind of thrust me into being I knew I was going to be a psychology major when I went to college, and then I ended up double majoring in African American studies, which further serves who I am and kind of where I am today. But I remember that storyline kind of paired with what I knew about my family. I didn't know anything about mental health per se, but just like wanting to help people and really, really being interested in differences between people and like why people are so different and how that's affecting people. All of that kind of came together towards psychology. And then taking psychology classes, your 101s, all the regular, whichever kind of stuff. But I think because I paired that with being an African American studies major really sealed the deal for me in terms of like who I wanted to work with. I mean, it was people who looked like me. It was people who had similar experiences, but also people who looked like me who had different experiences. And that was a lot of what I was doing in terms of my classes, in terms of my research in undergrad, in terms of like community work in undergrad as well. And that then set the stage for grad school. But I had support of my parents because I was advancing my education, but not because they cared about what I was doing or like understood or like respected psychology. No lie, you could call my dad now and ask him what I do, and he knows that I'm a psychologist, but he'll throw in a joke that I'm just getting paid to be somebody's friend. Like he does not like respect the psychology until somebody has a problem, and then he calls me like, well, can you work with them? They need a psychologist. I'm just like, oh, so now I'm the one, like now right. I'm the one in the two. So it's been that kind of paradox with receiving their support. But again, their support is much more because immigrant families and like American education, right, is a big thing that they strive for and they kind of come here for. But like I said, it isn't the right profession. My family would be much more proud if I was a surgeon or a pediatrician or something like that. So, or some type of scientist.
Right. Was private practice always the goal when you were in grad school? Is that
not at all
the path that you were on?
Mm-mm. So I went to undergrad at Syracuse University, and it's research, right? So a lot of what they were talking to us about and kind of training us towards was academia and teaching and like PhD, which is not the degree that I have. So I actually really didn't get a lot, if like any support towards clinical work from professors, from the minimal mentors that I had there in my psychology department. One, because they weren't clinical, and two, because of the population I was interested in. I was also at a very white university. So that was a complete wash. I had to really like just hone that in for myself and just like really kind of keep myself going with that until grad school. Private practice didn't become a thing in my mind until internship of my degree. So like 4 years of schooling, and then we do internship, and then we do postdoc. On internship, we used to have some speakers come in and talk about what they're doing. So whether they're in a college counseling center or whether they're in private practice, whether they run an agency. So that was like my first like education around it, separate from like what you see on TV. It's like, oh, I know that there are therapists who are like in the office doing therapy, but I don't really know it in terms of like the business sense of it. And then when I was on postdoc, that's a time where you're sitting for licensure, kind of getting all your ducks in a row to kind of move on to your next position. And I was in college mental health. So I was kind of all I knew for the last few years. And I had applied to positions at different university counseling centers, and either they weren't hiring, or there's a whole bunch of other drama. I revoked an application from one because it was just drama, and I was just like, and my current site wasn't hiring for staff. So I remember about 2 months and a half, maybe 2 months before my postdoc ended in 2012, my supervisor was just like, you need to prepare to be open for business. And I said, whose business? Whatever are you, what do you mean business? That was the first time I like business. And she was just like, well, you're coming up on the end of postdoc. You're not doing another year of postdoc. I think you need to consider private practice. And I was like, I see it. Again, she was in private practice. A few of the staff where I was training had like part-time private practices, but not anything that we had any kind of training in. We had somebody come in and talk about being in private practice, but that wasn't teaching us how to be in private practice.
Yeah, there's no business classes in your program.
Not at all. We were trained to work for agencies, or we were trained to be in academia. We were trained to do research. And so that was then what we focused on for the next like 6 weeks and kind of wrapping up my training was, she's like, you need to find office space. You need to figure out some fees, and you need to start meeting with different colleagues who are out around Atlanta to start getting referrals. So that's what I spent the latter part of my postdoc that last month was reaching out to clinicians who we like tend to refer to already. So I knew their names, clinicians who we tend to refer to already, to just try to see them for coffee. I wasn't paying for it yet. They were nice enough to pay for some of my coffee.
You didn't have a job. Yeah.
Yes, it turned into me offering coffee, but I couldn't do that at first. Yeah. And the picking your brain kind of stuff about, hey, you're connected with Emory. You trained at Emory. I'm coming out really soon. Like, please teach me how. And they were very, very welcoming, very generous. And the day after postdoc ended, I was open for business. And that was it. I wasn't open for good business or big business. I was open for business. And trial by fire, I am still open 12 years later.
You're still here.
Yeah. Wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but I am still here. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was out of necessity. We've talked to therapists on the show who, they build up a part-time practice on the side, and once it gets to a certain point, they're able to go full-time. But for you, it sounds like it just is what you needed to do because it was the only option. You mentioned you went out and got an office space, which now you probably wouldn't need to do, right? Because you can operate virtually. Met with referral sources and networked. You mentioned like figuring out your fees. How did you navigate how much to charge and how to collect money and how to manage your finances?
You are taking all the way back.
If at all.
Right. So what was really helpful, so one of the people who I met with was a former postdoc at Emory who had come to talk to us about private practice, and she had office space right across from Emory's upperclassmen housing. So very convenient. I was very familiar with the area because that's all I knew of Atlanta was Emory surroundings. And I remember reaching out to her, and she said that I was just kind of talking about where I was at and kind of what was going on. And she was just like, I have office space. And she was like, and because I do want to help you out, it's a whirlwind kind of that kind of time period. She said that you can rent office space in between. So I think someone else had the office, but I would be in there when they weren't because I didn't have a big caseload. She's like, you can rent office space and I'll charge you $15 an hour. And I will only charge you $15 if your client shows up. So you have a no-show or a cancellation, don't worry about charging me. And like that was unheard of because all the other places that I started looking for office space would say, you got to block out this time. You got to do 3 hours at a time. It's, $60 per hour. Like you would be losing money until I like made clients. And I never lost money in this arrangement. And that was the point. So when I left postdoc, I think I had 3 clients who came with me. They couldn't come at the same frequency that I was seeing them at the counseling center. So I think 2 of them were coming like bi-week, every other week or something like that. And I made up a fee. And the math that I was doing in my mind was like, And the suite that I was in was next to this. She owned a suite of offices. So there were 5 therapists in there who were just paying her rent. So I remember looking at the math and saying, well, I can't charge what she charges because she has been doing this for longer. She's better than me. She's licensed, and I wasn't licensed either. So depending on the state, you can do that. This state, I was allowed to do that. And she also said that she would be my supervisor. So I had taken 2 of my exams. So in Georgia, you have to take the HROP, jurisprudence, and then the oral exams. A lot of other states don't have the 3 parts. Georgia's ridiculous. I had taken the HROP and my jurisprudence, but I was scheduled to take my oral in like September. And this was August. So she's like, I'll supervise you. I'll sign off on your notes for whoever you see. And yeah, so I knew that my fee was going to be less than her fee. And I was also, my therapist was a psychologist. So I was like, it's got to be less than her fee because she's better than me, because you can't help me that she's better than me. And then I was like, but it's got to be, you know, like, I think my postdoc supervisor had said something like, well, you're going to be a psychologist, so it shouldn't be less than like 115 or like something like that. So I think I started at maybe 115 or 120.
Yeah, just very
They're
arbitrary.
like, do market research in the area, and I'm just like, I don't. I'm looking at 3 people's websites, and we're just going from there. And then when I got licensed, when I passed my oral exam and got licensed, I think I randomly like bumped my fee up by like $20. I'm like, I'm licensed now. It's $20 more.
Give yourself a raise.
Yeah, that was it. So I brought 2 clients over from the counseling center, and because I'd done my training at Emory, they also knew who I liked to work with. I was typically working with Black students, Black women graduate students. So I started just getting a lot of referrals for Black students who had either used up their sessions or just needed a longer term referral. So if they could pay, which is usually their parents, I was starting to like trickle in those referrals. And I also had 3 contracting jobs while I was building. So once I left Emory's formal postdoc position, I started contracting there for a few hours, maybe like, I think like 10 hours a week. So I was contracting at the Student Counseling Center, I was contracting at Emory's EAP, and I was contracting at another university's counseling center just to kind of put money together until I could build my caseload. So
this was before the day of online mental health platforms, right? Like these EAP companies you can contract with. So you were doing that.
I was doing that,
in real life, yeah.
That was great. And Emory was a different kind of site because their EAP is on site. So I'd done part of my postdoc training there. So they also knew what kind of clients I like to work with, and I would see couples and stuff there. So they always needed referral sources in the area. And surrounding Emory has a lot of clinicians and physicians because it's a big university, but not a lot of Black women and not a lot of Black women psychologists. One of them I was seeing. And then there were maybe 4 or 5 other Black women psychologists who were part of like the regular like Emory referral. So I knew that there was also a scarcity for Black women psychologists, and like Emory was really, really needing more Black women therapists to refer to.
Yeah, it sounds like you were fulfilling a need then of the community.
Yeah, and I do remember at that time, what was really interesting, so oftentimes when you're an intern or a postdoc, you're in a cohort. And both years in my cohorts, I'm the only single trainee and I'm the only Black woman trainee. So I remember this very different experience in my cohort because a few of them were starting up practices, but they had husbands who had insurance. So they were just like, I can like build this up and like take my time because I'm taking care of it. I'm just like, I don't have that option. I need to have 3 jobs plus figuring this out. I can't do this slowly. I can't, play around too much with numbers. I essentially kind of have a sliding scale, but I can't do sliding scale stuff. Like I need to make money. I probably was also taking out, I think I was still like deferred on my loans. I probably had some cash, but like I need to do this in a different way. So I remember even talking to one of my peers in my cohort about just how different this experience was. And I was just like, this is like, it was trial by fire for all of us, but in a way that felt much more like urgent and dire for me because they had backing. in a way, and I didn't have anybody else to talk to about. That's not my therapist. I didn't have anybody else to really talk about that experience with, because we are in totally different tax brackets, scopes, all that kind of stuff. Figuring this out, like I felt like I was figuring this out by myself, and they had privileges, and they had some padding that I didn't have.
Yeah. Were you taking insurance at this time?
I didn't. So when you can't take insurance, you're licensed.
Yep.
And then once I realized that I am doing this, I was like, I'm not going to take insurance. I don't even know why. I just didn't want to. I was very anxious about the application. That CAQH stuff was a beast. Like, I remember looking at it one time and I was just like, nope, can't do it. Like, can't. So it wasn't even about me understanding that insurance really takes a lot of my money. The application process was just really, really overwhelming while I was just trying to find clients. But I did end up applying to be on an insurance panel the next year. And then it took about 4 months. It took until like the next year's summer to be accepted to the panel. And I chose that panel very specifically because that was the main insurance of Emory University. And they were my main clientele. So that's the only insurance that I ever took the whole time I took insurance up until last year. And that was very, very strategic for me. I knew that once I got on this insurance, Emory's going to flood me with referrals and then I'd be good. And it worked exactly like that. Once I sent out that email that I'm on, that I was taking this insurance panel, I got referrals all the time.
When you look back, especially in the beginning, the first year or two, are there things that you would have done differently now, or mistakes that you made?
Absolutely. I would, and I'm still this way. I am very avoidant of numbers and tax stuff and money stuff. Like, I would have talked to my therapist about this business avoidance stuff, and I would have confronted a lot of my money stuff sooner. But I don't even know if I had the bandwidth for it. I just needed the money. I was just like, I'm going to put these jobs together. I just need money in my account. But I would have at least reached out for assistance around that earlier. So either by getting an accountant or even by talking to colleagues about money. I wasn't doing either.
So when you say avoidance, what did that look like?
I was making money, but I wasn't even established as a business until after I took insurance, like the LLC, doing all that kind of stuff. I had no clue about that. Having a business license, I knew none of those things. And for me, getting an accountant was this whole new process because I was just used to having a W-2, sending it to my parents, and having our family tax guy do my taxes.
Right. Yep.
Like, me having to get a receipt. I didn't have a business card. This whole collecting your receipts, tracking your money. I didn't have a separate account to put it in. Everything was flowing into my personal account. Those kinds of things. I would have, like I said, either sought more support from my colleagues who were figuring those things out, who were right in the same, they were starting their practices around then, or I would have asked a colleague about accounting stuff for this and figured out what they were doing or who they were using or asking for some kind of help. But I got really silent about money. I was just making it, and it didn't feel like I was making it because I didn't have it still. I just made it and it went right back out. I would have gotten some organization around that a year sooner than I did. I eventually got an accountant because I asked an older colleague who she uses, and she gave me this person's name, and then I just started working. He messed up all my shit up, but at least I started working with him.
Can you share about that?
Yeah. If I have an accountant, I can't go to jail. He would go to jail. And that was my main thing at that point, was just if I can tell the feds that I have an accountant, I'm out of this. So I just needed some type of backing that said, it's not me messing up my numbers.
They signed the tax return, right? So that's their license on the line. Yeah.
That's him. And I eventually got a new one years later. But again, I didn't know he was messing stuff up because I don't know anything about tax. When I say no financial literacy, I had no financial literacy. My family tax guy didn't educate me on stuff. It was just get your W-2s to him and he does whatever he does. So yeah, so I would have done that stuff sooner. The money stuff is the main thing I would have done sooner. And like I said, internally, like confronting my own story and relationship with money and making money. I'm the only entrepreneur in my family. My family couldn't help me. I didn't ask them, but I also didn't ask them because they don't understand this. They have no clue about taking money directly and like any of those kinds of conversations. So the only people I would have had to go to would be colleagues. And I think I felt too embarrassed or like shameful around them knowing that I don't have this figured out. So yeah, I was just in the dark for a long time around that.
Yeah. What about when you look back, things that you did do well? Are there certain keys to success that you feel like set you up to have a, successful practice?
And I think that's something that I did well then that I took for granted, but that I think I do well now that some parts of me still take it for granted. But I'm extroverted. I have really good relationships with people, and that became the foundation of my business. And that was also there in grad school. It was there on postdoc and on internship and postdoc. While I liked doing therapy, I also wanted to have liaisons with different campus offices, right? So I'm seeing students in other realms. I'm offering, right, support that's not therapy support, but it's like therapeutic because I am in the multicultural office, having groups with students, talking about things related to, Black culture and dating or Black culture and depression. Like I'm always in and out of the office space. So I think I had built a number of relationships. It wasn't hard for me to email somebody and ask them to go to coffee. It wasn't hard for me to ask questions about these things, depending on the colleagues. So I think that really helped me because people knew I was in business and people knew who I liked to work with. I was, as I probably am now, pretty loud about who I serve and why I serve them. Mm-hmm. And that being abundantly clear, I think the other piece is that because so many of my colleagues and the clinicians in the area are white, they couldn't wait to have somebody Black to refer to because the other 3 Black psychologists who were women were booked, filled up. So there was always this like, oh gosh, if a Black student comes in and says they want to work with somebody Black, who are we going to refer them to? So me being loud enough about that, I think was remarkably helpful. And that was something that I wasn't loud about in undergrad and I wasn't loud about in graduate school until the end because the messaging was that you can't say that. You can't just work with Black people. Like why? Or why do you want to work with Black people? I remember somebody saying to me, yeah, you kind of want to work with Black people. You're going to be poor. You're not going to make any money if you're just only going to have Black clients. I said, okay. And there was earlier in my career, I believed them. The stigma, even stigma around kind of Black people and money and like willingness to pay. And yes, that stuff is still exists in different ways. But I learned very quickly that I'm in Atlanta. And listen, if it's a place that Black folks got some funds, it's Atlanta. So I was just saying, I was fine. Like, and I really had to remind myself and kind of get evidence of like, Black people do take care of their health. Black people do go to therapy. Black people can do self-pay or private pay. Black people will pay for therapy. They will send their children to therapy. They will go to couple counseling. Like there were all these myths that I was kind of butting up against that, like I said, I did internalize and believe for a while, but had to keep just putting it out there. And I would get referrals and they would come and they would stay and they would come back and they would come back and they would come back. And then I started having more Black clinician colleagues and it was just like, oh, this is happening. Like your practice is 60% Black client, like all this kind of stuff. So I really just needed to like externalize like all the things that I'd begun believing about Black people and healthcare seeking. And that was also kind of a turning point for my practice where, again, I was becoming more loud about Black people and therapy and that marketed or branded, I sometimes don't know the difference, where more Black people were reaching out to me. You taught me this. Where Black people were reaching out to me specifically because they wanted a Black therapist. And then that just, again, I'm in Atlanta and it took off.
Right. Does that shortage of Black therapists still exist or has that changed?
It exists. There are more Black therapists. There's still, there's more Black therapists, understandably, even at a master's level than there are at the doctoral level. So there are more Black psychologists here now than I remember from 10 years ago. Ones who were here that I just didn't know about because they just be in a bubble, and then other ones who are training at Emory or kind of doing whichever it is. Yeah. So there are more, but all those barriers in terms of education and finances and, being able to take these kinds of risks to start up a practice still exist, which is why I do some, mentoring or some coaching for like emerging clinicians, because I didn't really have, early on, I didn't have somebody Black who I was talking to about this and about working with Black people, how to market in certain ways to Black people. So Atlanta has also grown. So I would say that the numbers are higher, but the need is also higher in a lot of ways. So I think the gap still kind of feels the same, but there's still not enough of us to meet the population needs.
The statistics that I've seen, and I don't know how up to date they are, but 4% of psychologists are Black and 2% of psychiatrists. So still very much a small number.
Still very much a problem. Very much a problem. Yep.
Yeah. Was there anything that surprised you as a business owner going into private practice that you weren't expecting?
A few things. I think personal things. Like I was surprised that the transition into a business owner, even though I know it intellectually, like wouldn't be easy, I was surprised that it was pretty hard for me. Kind of still rings true. I like doing therapy. I don't like none of this other stuff. And I thought that once I kind of got more of a savvy for it, I'd find some parts of like running a business that I like. Haven't found it. Don't like it. Don't like it.
Interesting. So you like working in the business, but
yes,
on the business you're not as interested in.
I like therapy. I like therapeutic stuff. I like running my mouth on social media about mental health, therapy, and pop culture, like all that kind of stuff. But managing things.
Or growing into like a private practice and hiring other therapists. Is that not something that you're interested in?
Oh, I'm interested. I am terrified.
Oh.
I am always interested. I have had ideas for at least 6 or 7 years about hiring other therapists and kind of building out this like wellness thing. But you ain't gonna see me do it because I am terrified and I'm busy. I'm seeing too many clients. So no, always on my mind, but it's this similar kind of like, that's so much to think about and do and be responsible for and manage and keep track of. And when that gets really big, I go back to my default, which is what I know, and I do therapy. And if I get really anxious about trying to scale my business, I'm probably going to pick up another client. That's literally how it happens. That's literally how it happens. So I think about scaling and all those kinds of things. These are things that I was not thinking about early on. Early on was just about getting this stuff established enough, getting some regular clientele in there. And once I started taking insurance, my practice was full in about a month. So then the surprise became about like, oh, I have a lot of people to manage. And like things are happening here. Like I've got regular clients, I've got weekly, I've got people who are coming in. I think it was weekly and every 2 weeks was my cadence for all my clients. And I remember being really surprised by tiring it was. It was just like, oh, I'm holding a lot of space for a lot of people. I like most of my clients. All my clients are I'm doing good work in here, but I'm exhausted. So like I remember getting to this point where like I finally got into the part of life where like I can do the happy hours. I can do all the things that my peers that I grew up with have been doing since they were 21 or like 22. And now I'm 26 or 27. I remember talking to my therapist about what felt like this like social developmental delay. I'm just like, oh, other people are like doing this, like dating, like all these things. And I'm just like,
what's that? Yeah.
Like going out for a drink, like all this stuff. Like those are not things that were part of me as a grad student. They weren't on internship. I was exhausted. So I remember kind of coming into this whole new like, oh, I'm like a 20-something person, like in Atlanta. I've got the career, but the rest of my life is not flushed out at all. my nucleus was Emory. I'd had some friends from undergrad who lived here, so we would like do some things, but I didn't really have a crew. I didn't have a clique. Like it was just me going to work, and then I'd see my Syracuse friends like every now and then, but I wasn't like building a like social community. And I just thought that those things would happen once I made it into the career. Like I'm a professional now, and I had to do some work to do that. And that actually didn't really happen. I didn't really establish a social life and like circle until 2014, until like, yeah, a few years later, feeling stabilized enough in the business to be like, okay, now I can like play a little bit more. And like I said, just kind of feeling stabilized enough to then do other stuff. And I'm still shocked about just how much entrepreneurship takes from you. It is relentless. It's not they say like you got your 9 to 5 and your 5 to 9. Like it's just, I'm always working. And if I'm not working, I'm thinking about working. Like it's just, I have not had my mind really doesn't have a break since 2012. Like it's just, there's always something that needs to be done. And I wish I would have mastered the small stuff earlier. When I say small stuff, I mean time task management around like, hey, you have a session, do your damn notes. Like just like system things that I just never got onto early. You make this much, money, or like every week or every month you put this aside for taxes. Like those kinds of things that should be just very, very routine. You can just get yourself into a habit. I did not do those things early enough. So it was a big deal to like really bring those into a like structure 5 years into business. And I wish I would have, like I said, I wish I would have just mastered the small stuff sooner. Get your paperwork together. And the logo and all that kind of stuff doesn't matter, but I ended up using a business consultant, and she was just like, you're going to name your practice in 2 weeks because you're taking too long. You need to like figure this out. But like those things, just like, and it doesn't matter. It matters what your practice name is, but it don't matter what your practice name is. Get a name, get it going, figure it out later. Like it's those kinds of things that I would get really, really stuck in. I remember wanting to like make my practice name like the initials of my nieces, and I was doing all this. I was just like, what are you? I cannot, like, looking back, I'm like, girl, get it done. Like, just get it done. I was trying to make it this like business. And those are the things that, like I said, for some people it does matter. For me, it actually doesn't matter. It's Ascension Behavioral Health. Ascension don't mean nothing but Ascension. Like, it doesn't, nothing special or deep or honorable about my name. She gave me 2 weeks, and I said, okay. I put in a name generator, and here we are. So,
isn't there a concept in psychology that we like spend the time that's allotted to a given task?
Yes,
I don't remember what the theory is called, but
it's a P.
It's a thing. Yeah.
I forgot. It's not Pythagorean. Yes, but exactly. You'll take the time that you have to do it, and you'll stretch it out for the full time. Yep.
Right.
That was me.
Have you been able to find that community that you were missing early on of other professionals and therapists?
Absolutely. I probably do more community than I do my damn job. But absolutely found them. And I think this is where I take for granted my, I think, natural social skill. It's not difficult for me to go places by myself, to walk into an event and not know anybody, and either just stay to myself or meet people, to send an email saying, hey, saw you here, to send somebody a DM and make a friend there. So I actively like built my social community, like non-work related, and actively built my clinical community by I was going out and meeting clinicians every week or weekend for a while. This is like months, if not years, and some like repeating, like now like building friendships and relationships with people. But I like two of my closest colleagues, I think I went to an open house, and she's a psychiatrist, a forensic psychiatrist, and her office was in the same building. She came upstairs, she was just like, oh, Black people. I was like, oh, we're friends. And she's been one of my closest colleagues. She's taught me so much about business. She's this amazing forensic psychiatrist. It's like, it's it's that easy for me. And a lot of my business, my clients, and how my business has grown is also because of my connections outside of mental health. So I go to community events, I go to different shows, I go to movie screenings. I am in Atlanta, and you just talk to people and they get to know what you do, who you are. They start following you on social media. I end up getting these like random referrals, such and such from such and such mentioned that you're a therapist. I am. And then that turns into a client. So I would say that it really fed the clinical side of my business, but also fed me just socially and emotionally, just to connect with different people. A few years into my practice, I started hosting meetups for Black women therapists in Atlanta. So we'd have, 30 to 50 therapists come out to these events, and we just, again, light bites and kind of light snacks. We would just talk and just get to know each other. You do this, you do this. Oh, you didn't know that you trained there the year after they did, and just making all these different kinds of connections. And I did maybe 8 or 10 of those kinds of events. So I was seeing people over and over again, lots of referral sharing. So that's usually how I got to know a lot of different therapists. And that's how I didn't do it for referrals, but that is how you get referrals. And people are more likely to refer to you when they have a relationship with you. I'll be in these Facebook groups and I see a whole bunch of names all the time, but like, I don't know you, so I'm less likely to refer to you. But the minute that we've gone to coffee or gone and done something together, you're at the top of my referral list. And because I was full, my practice got full, and it stayed full for years and years and years. I was referring, I'd probably get 10 to 15 therapy requests like a week from Psychology Today or just kind of in the community. And I would refer to my friends. I'd refer to people who I've met before, and who I've met and liked before, and they would just be at the top of my list. And I'm saying I'm getting 10 options a week, and I'm just sending them all out. So that is how I've always operated, and that's always worked for my business. But it was really rooted in relationships with people.
We have a mutual friend in Dr. Joy of Therapy for Black Girls. Shout out to Dr. Joy.
Yes.
If you're listening, how did the two of you meet?
I ran up in her emails. So I had heard about Joy for years because she was one of the Black women psychologists who was in the area. I knew that she had some connection to Emory, and then I heard that. I was like, there's a practice in Decatur called Therapy for Black Girls? Hold up. Hold up. And I remember hearing about it for a little while. I remember asking my therapist about, like, do you know her? Like, have you heard? Who is this person? And the podcast hadn't started. I think she was fully clinical, and maybe she was over at a university, in a counseling center. But I sent her email saying that I've heard of you. I know you're in the area. I can't believe like you're like located right there. We haven't met in some way. Do you want to go out to eat? We had the same favorite place right over there by Emory, and we went to eat. I don't even know what year that was, but yeah. And that was that. Maybe a few months after that. It was the first time I had done an episode on her podcast. And then we've been cool ever since. A few years ago, now we have a group chat, and I've been on the podcast several times. Like, we do a lot of different events together, and that's what I'm talking about. I am not as worried about like appearing like creepy by like sliding.
You have to shoot your shot, right?
Yeah, like I have minimal problem doing that, and I wasn't doing that to get on her podcast. I wasn't doing that to get on anything kind of after that. I was doing that because I'm just like, we are similar. We obviously kind of hold the same racial identity and gender identity, but like we work with the same clients. Like, what's going on in this community? Like, teach me something. You've been here longer than me. And that's how it started. It started with me looking for relationships and peer relationships and friendships. And then I do happen to have a number of colleagues or friends who are just doing like big shit. So then it just ends up then working out in these other ways, but I'm connected to them because I like them.
Right. Yeah. I think the point you're making is super important, that, building a referral network, it's all about relationships. And if you're coming in with intentions of, hey, like, I need clients, or here's who you can refer to me, or do you have any clients, or like, it's going to turn people off. But
Yeah.
if you go in with the intent just to establish a relationship, that's a great outcome, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe you'll do an event together down the road or
Right.
some other business engagement.
Mm-hmm.
But it all starts with relationships.
Yeah. We literally went and had barbecue together. Like that was the first. That
Right.
was the first friendship date, and then like, and that was
So
the
date
focus. We
other
both felt the
therapists
same
is what I'm
place.
hearing you say. Yeah.
You say what?
Date other therapists. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I absolutely. I am a firm believer.
Yeah.
And I still do that. If a colleague just reached out to me yesterday saying like, "Hey, we had lunch a while ago. Let's do it again. Let's do it. Let's do it." All right. Works for me.
I want to talk about your non-clinical work. So in the beginning of this conversation, we talked about consulting. I know you also do trainings and speaking. Could you talk about that side of your business and like how you're thinking about it and how to balance it with the clinical work that you're doing?
Yeah. I came into that in the same way, like by way of just relationships, like me just running my mouth so much about therapy or mental health or like Black community. People started asking me to come and talk to their small group or their event, or like, can you come to my church and like talk about this on Sunday? And it was just like, sure. I mean, I wasn't charging nobody then. I would do that differently. Child, I would. I've done too many free things. Hence, we were talking about that in our group. So that's how it started. It would just be me talking about how important mental health and Black community and relationships and functioning, all kind of stuff is. And people picked up on ways in which they could bring this back to whatever it was they were doing. Like I said, it would be churches, it would be different organizations. I remember somebody inviting me to come and talk at a family reunion about stuff. Like, it's just people want this kind of information and they don't have a lot of resources, or maybe they don't trust a lot of different resources to come and talk. So I was fine doing things like that. And I would fill in my schedule just a little bit. It would be a Saturday afternoon. It would be a Wednesday night or something like that. And I didn't think about it in terms of like as like a business arm until a few years in, when like bigger organizations would say stuff. And then they would say, this is our, honorarium, or like, this is our speaker fee. And it was just like, there's money in this. Like, oh, I could charge for this. And I talked to other people and I was like, you should be charging for that. Like, I would do trainings and they would be free. I'd do trainings over at Emory and all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't even thinking about charging them because I really just wanted to be a resource, specifically as it related to Black mental health, in like white spaces that were just like desperate and like harming people. So I'm just like, if money's going to get in the way, I don't even want to think about it. But like, please stop saying this kind of stuff in session. So it wasn't until I think right before we had started meeting a few years ago, and I was doing some stuff and I'd get some money, here and there, but I didn't have a fee. I didn't have a rate. I didn't have any of that stuff from me. If they wanted to pay me, they would pay me. If they didn't, I'd probably say yes anyway. So I'd be doing podcast episodes. I'd be doing different local events. I think by that time I'd started using social media a little bit more and was talking about some things. And then 2019, I was doing more stuff with a specific organization that was bigger. So they were paying me for different talks and not paying me for other talks. But I liked being able to, speak to companies like Sony and Def Jam or talk about this or talk about this. So I didn't need pay per se. And then it wasn't until 2020 when there was this other boom around racism-based trauma that it was just like, oh, companies are going to pay. Wait a minute. Yeah, the folks who got the money are going to pay. And then having to really actually make a lot of decisions about making money, having those kinds of conversations, doing those kinds of trainings in spaces when it was also performative and it's like, oh, it's these one-offs. And so, 2020 was a huge boom for my business and I'd gone virtual. I closed my physical office space, but 2020, my business did really well. In 2021, my business did really well, unfortunately, because people were so unwell. Yeah. And what I always say is that I will never be out of a job, fortunately and unfortunately. My job stability is sealed. A therapist's job stability is sealed. I know people are scared of AI. Just figure out how to use it. It'll be all right. But I am not worried about AI. I don't know if I should be, but that's a different conversation. But yeah, people are so unwell that we are in a high demand. We are in a high demand service. So 2020, when now there was DEI stuff, and now we're talking about, racism in the workplace and racism and how we're navigating, seeing images, things that had been there before that I was already talking about, but now people are willing to pay for it so that they can feel better about their companies or their mission statement or their black box. And I remember kind of feeling a bit of guilt around it, being like, no, you can't take these people's money. Don't do that, because they're not like doing like deep transformative work. And at the same time, I'm just like, well, I'm black folk too. I also need reparations. So I'm going to talk to these people, and they're going to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to say things, and we're just, that's what it's going to be. And obviously that has now dried up, as we know. So, but 2020 and 2021 saw me now with a consulting hat, being like, wait a minute, I need to structure this. I need to figure out a way to actually make this a very clear offering of mine. And I didn't know how to do that. Hence, I met you. I think it was Whitney. It was Whitney who posted on social media, like, hey, this is happening. Sign up now. I was just like, okay, Whitney. I'll do it. Didn't know much. But that was really where a more formal hat came in for me to think about rates and conversations at different kinds of organizations and who to speak to in organizations if I'm going to pitch myself versus people coming.
It's such a mindset shift, right? For a therapist who is trained that I charge an hourly rate, or my session fee is $150 an hour. So if a company is reaching out to me and they want me to give an hour talk, I'll just charge my hourly rate. And I'm going to charge $150 for a talk, when in reality, you can charge $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 for that type of talk. And then even, going back to that company and saying, hey, instead of a talk, here's how I work with organizations as a consultant. I come in, I'll conduct an evaluation. We'll have the 6-month program. This is my price, right? And so thinking about how to package up your expertise in a way that you can sell it as a consulting service, where now you're not making $150 an hour, you're making $1,000 an hour or more. And those companies will pay.
Yep. And that was the working with you kind of in that cohort was the biggest shift for me in terms of like, oh, I got to get out of this like hour. Again, I'm still stuck there, obviously, but I got to get out of this like hourly. I'm better, but that was, again, you do what you know. And I was viewing the hour as the same hour because I'm just looking at it as 60 minutes. Like it's the same hour. I'm just like, no, it's not the same. It's not the same hour. It absolutely is not the same hour. And then you factor in like, I want to do tech checks. You want to meet beforehand. You want a handout. You want to right? So all that kind of stuff. It's really not the hour. Even if companies they'll still play games. They'd be like, but it's just an hour. But now I know it's like, no,
it's actually 10 years of experience that I have, right?
Yes. And you're recording this and you get to use this for this and this and this and this. So now we talking licensing agreements, baby. So like now we're in different conversations now. So, but that was, like I said, that 2021 was, again, it's the same thing as my business before. I was already doing this stuff, but the structure came after I was already doing the work. I wasn't structured before and then moving forward in this like organized fashion. I go the opposite direction, which creates more stress for me.
We're coming to the end of this conversation. I want to wrap it up with the segment that we call the footnote. Okay. What is one thing that you want therapists to take away from this episode?
I would like therapists to know, or to remind them, that our training or our skills, I think, are some of the most transferable skills out of any industry. And we are not taught that. But your skills are applicable across any industry you can think of, not just ours, and to not limit ourselves to our industry with consulting or whatever it is you're thinking about. But you have the most transferable skills than any other industry.
I love that. Dr. Ayanna, where can folks connect with you if they're interested in learning more about you, or they want to get barbecue with you. And
want to get married, you got to come to Atlanta. They still open. We'll still go. The name of my practice is Ascension Behavioral Health, ASCENSION. And the website is ascensionbehavioralhealth.com. The best place to find me is Instagram. As you know, I'll be running my mouth a lot on there about clinical stuff and non-clinical stuff. Don't get me going. We're out here. So my Instagram handle is Dr_Ayanna_A. That's DR_AYANNA_A. I have a TikTok. Don't worry about it. Just deal with Instagram. I'm playing around on Threads. Also, don't worry about it. But Instagram will give you all of that information.
Great. We'll drop that in the description. Thank you, Dr. Ayanna, again for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. This is good.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Herd Business School, brought to you by Herd, the financial back office for therapists. Visit the Herd Resource Hub at joinherd.com to support you in your journey as a private practice owner. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next class.